When the universe turned dark, a human brought the light. The universe had always been full of light. For as long as memory stretched, the skies of my people glowed with endless suns. They gave us warmth, food, and rhythm. They were the heartbeat of the worlds we called home. When I was young, I used to lie on the cool plains of Kellier and watch the night sky. Thousands of stars twinkled above me like a sea of living fireflies. My grandmother told me they were the eyes of the first children, our ancestors who had left their spirits scattered in the heavens, watching over us forever. I believed her. Back then, we all did. But then the stars began to die. It started as a whisper, a rumor carried by trade ships, whole systems vanishing from the charts, swallowed by blackness. At first, we dismissed it as an exaggeration or the usual chaos of frontier space. But then the silence grew too loud. Vessels returned from their journeys with their engines trembling and their crew pale with terror. They spoke of suns that no longer burned, of planets left frozen and airless, of a darkness so thick it seemed alive. Our scholars said it was impossible. Stars did not simply extinguish, not on this scale. But then the wave came, and theory crumbled into ash. I was there when it reached us. It was not a storm, though we called it that later for lack of better words. It was a wave, black, endless, hungry, that swept across our skies in a single night. One moment, the heavens above Kellier blazed with 1,000 pinpricks of gold, and the next, the stars winked out. One by one, like candles pinched between cruel fingers. People screamed in the streets, pointing skyward as the darkness spread. The priests collapsed in their temples, crying that the gods had abandoned us. Farmers dropped their tools in the fields. Children clutched their mothers and asked why the night would not end. But the night never ended. When the sun rose the next day, it was pale, shrunken, as though smothered by an invisible veil. Its warmth barely touched the ground. Crops withered. Rivers began to freeze at the edges, though it was still the season of growth. That was only the beginning. Within weeks, the animals grew restless, their instincts sensing what our minds refused to admit. Then the ships stopped coming. Trade routes went silent, and messages sent to neighboring systems vanished unanswered into the void. It was not only Kellier. It was everywhere. The wave, they said later, was the work of an empire older than any of us remembered, a people who had mastered a weapon of annihilation. A null wave, it was called, a force that drained the energy from stars themselves, leaving behind corpses of frozen rock and silent skies. No one knew why they had done it, or if they were even still alive. Perhaps it was their final act, a curse cast upon the galaxy. Perhaps it was simply cruelty. All I knew was that the universe was dying, and I, along with it. I remember the day my family fled the city. The ground shook as riot spread, and smoke choked the air. My father led us into the hills, promising that the countryside would be safer. But what safety could there be when the sky itself had betrayed us? We carried what little food we could. Within days, hunger gnawed at our bellies. My mother's lips cracked from the cold. My younger brother whimpered at night, too weak to cry aloud. I tried to be strong for them. I tried to keep faith. But one night, as I stood watch outside our makeshift shelter, I looked up at the heavens and found only emptiness. The stars, those eternal eyes of the first children, were gone. That was the moment I lost my belief. If the gods had ever existed, they had turned their gaze away. Weeks later, the disease claimed my brother. My mother followed soon after, her body too frail to survive the cold nights. My father, once unshakable, crumbled into silence and despair. He would sit for hours staring into the dark horizon, refusing food, refusing to move. When he did not wake one morning, I did not even cry. Grief had become a dull companion, an old shadow that no longer surprised me. I buried them all in shallow earth, my hands numb and bleeding from the frozen soil. When the last stone was placed, I stood alone. The wind whispered across the hills, carrying no warmth, no hope. Only the endless dark. I wandered after that, drifting from ruin to ruin. Sometimes I found others like me, survivors clinging to scraps of fire and faith. But their eyes were hollow, their bodies frail. None lasted long. The galaxy had turned into a graveyard. And yet, somewhere deep inside me, a spark still flickered. A question. Why had the stars died? Could nothing be done? Or was this truly the end of all things? I had no answers. Only the silence of the void. Then, one night, as I walked through the ruins of an abandoned colony, I saw something impossible. A light. It was faint, trembling, but real. A fire burning in the blackness. For a moment, I thought I was hallucinating, my mind conjuring false hope to mock me. But as I drew closer, the glow grew stronger. And then I saw it, a human ship, battered and broken, its hull scorched from battles long past. Yet through a crack in the plating, a warm golden light spilled out. A light that defied the dark. And in that moment, though I did not know it yet, my life changed forever. For when the universe had turned dark, it was a human who carried the fire. I stood frozen at the edge of the ruins, my eyes fixed on the glow leaking from the human ship. For so long, I had known only shadows. The endless black above, the pale, sickly light of a dying sun, the dull flicker of torches made from scavenged wood. Light had become a memory more than a reality, something I recalled from childhood but no longer expected to see. Yet here it was. Warm. Golden. Alive. I crept closer, my steps slow and uncertain. Every instinct screamed caution. Many survivors had turned violent in the dark years, willing to kill for scraps of food or a working battery. If someone still guarded this ship, they might not welcome me. But hunger and loneliness are greater dangers than any knife. And so, I approached. The ship lay half buried in rubble, its wings twisted like broken limbs. The hull bore scars of plasma fire, and one engine was completely gutted. This vessel had not flown in years. It was a relic, a corpse of metal left to rust. And yet, inside it, something pulsed with stubborn life. I reached a gash in the plating wide enough to slip through. For a moment I hesitated, my hands pressed against the cold metal, my heart hammering. Then I slid inside. The air was warmer here, faintly buzzing with the hum of old machinery. My eyes adjusted slowly, drinking in the golden light spilling from a small fire in the corner. It crackled in a makeshift pit of metal scraps, the smoke venting out through cracks in the hull. Beside the fire sat a figure. Human. I had heard of them, of course. Traders, explorers, warriors, humans had long wandered the stars before the wave. Some said they were reckless, others said they were kind. But all agreed on one thing, they were stubborn. Impossible to break. This one looked broken. He sat slumped against the wall, his chest bound in blood-stained cloth. His armor, sleek once, now dented and scorched, hung from his body in pieces. His face was pale, lined with exhaustion. A rough beard shadowed his jaw, and one eye was half swollen shut. Yet when he saw me, he did not reach for a weapon. He simply studied me, his good eye sharp, alert, alive. "You're not one of mine," he rasped, his voice low and hoarse. I froze, unsure how to answer. My language faltered, rusty from lack of use. "No," I said at last. "I, wanderer. Alone." He gave a short, humorless laugh. "Aren't we all?" Silence stretched between us, broken only by the crackle of the fire. I shifted uneasily, waiting for him to order me out. Instead, he reached to the side and pushed a battered canister toward me. "Water," he said simply. I stared at it. Suspicion gnawed at me, but thirst was stronger. I lifted it to my lips and drank greedily, the cold liquid burning down my throat like salvation. When I lowered the canister, my hands trembled. "Thank you," I whispered. The human gave a faint nod, as if the act required no gratitude. Then he leaned back against the wall, wincing at the movement. For a long time neither of us spoke. I studied the fire, mesmerized by its warmth, while he closed his eyes, breathing slow and shallow. At last, curiosity overcame me. "Why, here?" I asked. "Why stay?" His eye opened, glinting in the firelight. "Because the dark doesn't get to win." I frowned, not understanding. "The stars, gone. No one can fight that." "Someone has to," he said. His voice was quiet but steady, carrying a weight that pressed against my chest. "If we let the dark swallow everything, then it's already won. I won't give it that." There was no arrogance in his tone, no foolish bravado. Only certainty. A certainty I had not heard in years. I shook my head. "One man cannot stop the night." "Maybe not," he admitted. "But one man can light a fire. And maybe someone else will see it. Maybe they'll carry it forward." His gaze drifted to the flames, the light reflecting in his tired eyes. "That's all it takes sometimes. One spark." The words lodged deep inside me, stirring something I thought long dead. For years I had lived with despair as my companion. But here, in the wreckage of a broken ship, sat a man who refused to surrender. I studied him more closely then, noticing details I had missed before. His hands were blistered, scarred from work. His armor, though battered, bore insignia I did not recognize. And despite his wounds, his posture carried the weight of discipline, of training. "Soldier?" I asked softly. He hesitated, then nodded. "Was. Once. And now?" "Now," he gave another faint laugh. "Now I'm just stubborn." We shared the silence again, but this time it felt different. Less hollow. Less lonely. At last, the human shifted, groaning as he pushed himself upright. "I need your help," he said simply. The word startled me. "Mine? Why?" "Because I can't do this alone anymore." His gaze met mine, steady and unflinching. "And because you're here. That's reason enough. What is it you want?" He leaned forward, lowering his voice as if the shadows themselves might listen. "There's a place. Old. Forgotten. They called it the Forge of Stars. If it still exists, it can reignite suns." The words hit me like a blow. Impossible. Absurd. And yet, in his tone there was no doubt. "You believe this?" I whispered. "I know it," he said. "I've seen fragments. Records. Maps." He tapped the battered device on his wrist. "If we reach it, if we can make it work, we can bring the light back." I stared at him, my mind reeling. The Forge of Stars was a legend, a myth whispered by scholars and priests. No one had ever proven it real. And yet here was this broken soldier, claiming not only that it existed, but that he intended to reach it. "You are mad," I said. "Probably," he agreed with a weary smile. "But madness is better than despair." I should have walked away. I should have left him to his fire and his foolish dream. But something in his eyes stopped me, something fierce, unyielding, alive. For the first time in years, I felt the faintest flicker of hope. And so, against all reason, I nodded. "I will help." The human's smile widened, faint but genuine. "Good," he said. "Then we'll bring the stars back." Sleep did not come easily that night. I lay curled near the dying embers of the fire, my eyes fixed on the faint glow as though it were the last star in the universe. In truth, perhaps it was. The human had drifted into a fitful rest, his breathing ragged, one hand still gripping the weapon at his side even in sleep. I should have left. A sane person would have slipped into the dark, abandoned this wounded stranger and his impossible dream. The Forge of Stars. It was a story for children, not a destination for the broken. And yet, I stayed. Because for the first time in years, I was not alone. And because some reckless part of me wanted to believe him. When dawn came, or what passed for dawn under the pale choking light of our dying sun, the human stirred. He groaned softly as he pushed himself upright, his face pale with pain. Still, his eyes were sharp, alive. Still here, he muttered. I admitted. Then maybe there's hope after all. He rose unsteadily, leaning on the wall for support, and retrieved a battered datapad from the wreckage of the ship. Its screen flickered weakly, displaying a scatter of stars, most of them crossed out with jagged red lines. This, he said, tapping the display, is all I've got left. Fragments of navigation logs, half-burned records, whispers of old cartographers. It's not much, but it's enough to point the way. I peered at the screen, recognizing some of the symbols. The map was scarred with gaps and corrupted data, entire sectors swallowed by static. But there, at the far edge, pulsed a faint golden mark. The forge, he said quietly. His voice carried a reverence I had not heard since the priests still spoke of gods. You are certain it exists? I asked. I'm certain it has to, he replied. That was not an answer, but it was the only one he had. Over the next days, we prepared. Or rather, he prepared, and I learned. The human ship could no longer fly, but its systems still worked well enough to power small machines. He salvaged portable batteries, ration packs, and a plasma torch that sputtered weakly but might cut through wreckage. He taught me how to rig a beacon from broken comms, how to sharpen scavenged metal into a blade, how to listen for the faint hum of still-active conduits in derelict ships. He moved with the practiced patience of a soldier, efficient, deliberate, never wasting energy. I asked once why he bothered teaching me so much. His reply was simple. Because if I don't make it, you'll have to. I did not like that answer. Still, I listened. And slowly, I began to see the world differently, not only as a graveyard of ruins, but as a treasury of tools waiting to be used. Where before I saw broken glass, now I saw mirrors to signal with. Where before I saw twisted metal, now I saw armor, shelter, weapons. The human showed me how to fight the darkness, not with strength, but with stubbornness. With resourcefulness. And somewhere along the way, the silence inside me began to crack. One night, as we sat by the fire, I found myself speaking words I had not dared in years. My family, I said quietly. They are gone. The human did not look surprised. He simply nodded, as if he had known. Mine too, he said. A long time ago. Before the wave. What happened? War, he answered simply. We were always good at making enemies. He stared into the flames for a long time, his face shadowed. But we were good at something else too. We were good at standing back up. No matter how hard we got knocked down. He turned then, his gaze fixing on me with quiet intensity. That's why I believe in the forge. Because someone has to stand up. Someone has to say the dark doesn't get to win. If not us, then who? His words struck deep, resonating in places I thought long dead. For so long I had been waiting for someone else to fix the universe, someone greater, wiser, stronger. But perhaps there was no one else. Perhaps there was only us, the broken, the lost, the stubborn. Perhaps that was enough. The day we left the ruins, the sky was heavy with ash. The human walked slowly, leaning on a makeshift staff, his breath ragged. I carried most of the supplies, my body aching under the weight, but my spirit strangely light. For the first time in years, we were not running from the darkness. We were walking toward something. Our path took us through desolate colonies and shattered outposts, places where silence lingered like a second skin. More than once, we stumbled upon others, scavengers, raiders, the desperate. Some attacked, driven by hunger or madness. But the human fought with a ferocity I had never seen, his movements sharp and efficient despite his wounds. And when he faltered, I found myself stepping forward, blade in hand, unwilling to let him fall. We became a pair of shadows moving through a broken galaxy, leaving whispers in our wake. The alien and the human. The last fire and the stubborn soldier. At night, when we rested, he spoke of the forge. They say it was built by the first architects, he told me one evening, his voice low and steady. A machine so vast it could cradle stars in its heart. It was meant to be a gift, a safeguard against the end of light. And if it failed? I asked. Then we try anyway, he said simply. Because the alternative is nothing. I stared at him in the firelight, trying to understand how one man could carry so much certainty when the rest of the galaxy had surrendered. Perhaps it was madness. Or perhaps it was humanity. And slowly, impossibly, I began to believe. The journey stretched on, each day bleeding into the next. We scavenged what we could, fought when we had to, and endured when there was no other choice. The darkness pressed close, whispering despair, but always we carried the spark of our fire. Always, the human pushed forward. And though I did not yet know it, the path we had chosen would carry us farther than either of us imagined, into the very heart of the void, and into the truth of what it meant to fight for light. The galaxy had become a graveyard. We walked through it step by step, two figures moving across the skeleton of civilizations. The human carried the map, the fragments of coordinates that might lead to the forge. I carried most of the weight. Together, we carried something else too, a fragile hope, so small it could vanish with one mistake, one misstep. But it did not vanish. Our journey began with silence. Whole cities lay abandoned, their towers leaning like broken teeth, their streets empty except for the whisper of wind. I remember one world where statues stood frozen in a plaza, their faces carved in celebration of a festival that would never come again. The human touched the stone with his scarred hand and murmured, "They deserved better." I did not answer because there was nothing to say. Food was our constant enemy. We scavenged from ruins, sealed ration caches, fungal growths that clung to damp walls, even roots dug from frozen soil. The human showed me how to make traps, how to boil bark until it was chewable. Hunger gnawed at us always, but it never stopped us. Sometimes we found other survivors. That was worse. On one world, a band of raiders descended upon us, thin and ragged but vicious. Their eyes burned with desperation, their blades gleaming with the hunger of wolves. The human did not hesitate. He fought with a fury that startled me, his movements sharp and ruthless. Every strike was efficient, every blow designed to end the fight quickly. I joined him, clumsy but determined, my scavenged blade shaking in my grip. When the raiders fled, leaving their dead behind, I stood trembling, blood on my hands. My stomach churned, but the human only placed a hand on my shoulder. "You fought because you had to," he said. His voice was calm, steady. "Remember that." I nodded, though my heart still pounded with fear. But in that moment, something inside me shifted. For years, I had been prey. Now, I was learning to fight back. Not long after, we stumbled upon a group of children hiding in the wreckage of a school. Their guardians had died months ago, their bodies buried in shallow graves nearby. The children were starving, their eyes hollow. We gave them food. The human taught them how to light a fire, how to purify water. For 3 days, we stayed with them, showing them how to survive. When we finally left, one of the children pressed a broken pendant into my hand, a tiny sun etched into the metal. "To remember us," she whispered. "I still carry it." The journey tested us in every way. We crossed frozen wastelands where the wind screamed like a dying beast. We climbed mountains of wreckage where the ground trembled beneath our feet. Once, we hid for days from a band of scavenger kings who hunted the living like game. Through it all, the human endured. His wounds slowed him, his body weakened, but his spirit never bent. He walked with a stubbornness that defied reason, as though every step were a victory over the dark. At night, when we rested by our small fires, he told me stories. Stories of his people, of Earth. He spoke of oceans so vast they touched the horizon, of forests that sang with life, of cities that glowed brighter than the stars. He described music, laughter, the taste of fresh bread. He told me of wars too, of mistakes and loss, but always his stories ended with survival. With rising again. Humanity has always danced with extinction, he said once, his voice quiet as the flames licked the air. But we never stayed down. That's what makes us who we are. We fall. We bleed. But we keep going. I listened, hungry for every word. Through his voice, I saw a world I had never known. A world that had lived, and loved, and dreamed. A world that believed in light. And slowly, impossibly, I began to dream again, too. But the darkness did not rest. One night, as we crossed the ruins of a spaceport, the ground trembled. From the shadows emerged machines, automated drones, their red eyes glowing, weapons primed. They were remnants of the wave, guardians left behind to ensure nothing survived. The human cursed under his breath, pulling me into cover. They'll hunt us until we're ash, he said grimly. We ran. Through broken hangars and shattered ships, the drones pursued, their weapons scorching the ground. The human fired back with his battered rifle, each shot precise, buying us precious seconds. My lungs burned, my legs screamed, but still we ran. At last, cornered in a collapsed docking bay, the human shoved the plasma torch into my hands. Go, he barked. No. I cried, panic rising. Go. His voice was steel. You're the one who has to make it. If I fall, you keep going. Do you hear me? Tears stung my eyes, but there was no time to argue. Together, we fought, me slashing with the torch, him firing until his rifle clicked empty. Sparks and smoke filled the air. When the last drone fell in a burst of fire, I collapsed to my knees, gasping for breath. The human slumped beside me, blood seeping from a new wound in his side. We made it, he said hoarsely. His smile was faint but real. I pressed my hands against his wound, my voice breaking. You can't keep bleeding like this. You'll die. Not yet, he whispered. His gaze burned with that same unyielding fire. Not until we reached the forge. I wanted to tell him it was hopeless, that no one could survive this forever. But the words caught in my throat. Even broken and bleeding, the human carried something greater than survival. He carried a belief. And I could not abandon that. So I bound his wounds as best I could. I carried his pack when he could not. And together, step by step, we continued. Through shadows. Through despair. Toward a dream that might save us all. The further we traveled, the darker the galaxy became. Stars that once burned dimly now flickered and died. Whole systems lay in silence, their suns extinguished, their worlds drifting as frozen corpses in the abyss. It felt as though we were walking into the very lungs of the void itself, each breath tighter, each step heavier. The human pressed on, though his wounds grew worse. He hid the pain behind a stiff jaw and quiet words, but I saw it in the way he staggered when he thought I wasn't watching, in the way his breath rattled at night when he finally allowed sleep to take him. Still, he walked. The map on his datapad glowed faintly, guiding us ever closer to the mark, the Forge of Stars. A place whispered as myth, now the axis upon which our fates turned. Days blurred into weeks. We crossed asteroid belts where debris struck like knives, threading our way through fields of broken ships, armadas frozen from wars long past. We passed derelict colonies where lights still flickered in the windows, though no one remained to tend them. I began to wonder if ghosts walked with us, silent companions in our march toward the unknown. One night, as we camped in the hollow of a ruined freighter, I asked the question that had haunted me since the beginning. Why you? I said quietly, watching the human as he cleaned the barrel of his weapon with slow, deliberate movements. Why are you the one to find this place? He looked up, his one good eye glinting in the firelight. For a long time, he said nothing. Then. Because no one else would. The answer was simple, but it carried the weight of galaxies. You think it is destiny? I pressed. He shook his head. No. Just stubbornness. Everyone else gave up. I didn't. I studied him in silence, struck again by the rawness of his resolve. He was not chosen, not anointed, not blessed. He was simply unwilling to quit. And somehow, that was more powerful than any prophecy. Not long after, the map led us to the threshold. It was not a place of stone or metal, but of emptiness, a scar in the galaxy where light itself refused to dwell. The void stretched before us like a wound in space, its edges shimmering faintly with energy. My skin prickled as I stared at it. The forge lies beyond, the human said. His voice was low, reverent. How can we cross? I asked, my throat tight. He studied the swirling abyss. We walk. The idea chilled me. Nothing could survive within that darkness. And yet, when I looked at him, I saw no hesitation. Only determination. So we stepped into the void. The silence there was suffocating. No stars, no sound, only blackness pressing against our eyes and ears. My body screamed to turn back, but the human's hand brushed mine, steadying me. Keep walking, he whispered. One step at a time. We walked. And as we did, shapes began to emerge in the darkness, shadows that moved though there was no light to cast them. Whispers coiled in my ears, voices of doubt and despair. You will fail. There is nothing left. All light is gone. I stumbled, my chest tight, the weight of hopelessness dragging me down. But the human gripped my arm and pulled me forward. They lie, he said firmly. His voice cut through the whispers like a blade. The dark wants you to stop. Don't. His certainty became my anchor. Step by step, we pushed onward, even as the shadows clawed at us, even as despair gnawed at the edges of our minds. At last, after what felt like an eternity, the darkness thinned. And then, light. Faint at first, then growing, a glow that pulsed like the heartbeat of a star. We stumbled out of the void and into a vast chamber of metal and stone. The forge. It rose before us like a god's dream. Towers of machinery stretched into the heavens, their surfaces etched with runes that pulsed faintly. In the center burned a great sphere, dim and wounded, as though it had once been a sun itself, now waiting to be reborn. I fell to my knees, awe flooding me. It is real, I whispered. The human stood beside me, his face pale but his eyes burning with fierce triumph. Told you, he said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. But our victory was not yet complete. As we approached the heart of the forge, the air trembled. From the shadows emerged guardians, machines of impossible design, forged to protect the forge from intruders. Their eyes glowed like dying embers, their limbs sharp and terrible. The human raised his weapon, though his hands shook with exhaustion. Figures, he muttered. I drew my blade, my heart pounding. The guardians closed in, their movements swift, relentless. The battle was chaotic. Sparks flew as metal clashed, the air thick with the roar of machines. I fought desperately, slashing, dodging, my arms screaming with effort. Beside me, the human fought with the last of his strength, each strike fueled by sheer will. One guardian struck him, sending him sprawling to the ground. Panic surged through me. I leapt forward, driving my blade into the machine's core, sparks exploding as it fell. I turned, breathless, and saw the human struggling to rise, blood staining his armor. You can't, I began. Don't waste time, he rasped. His gaze locked on the great sphere at the forge's heart. Get it burning again. That's all that matters. But you. He forced a bloody smile. I'm just the spark. You're the fire. Tears blurred my vision, but I obeyed. Together, through blood and pain, we pressed toward the sphere, the guardians falling one by one. At last, we reached the heart. The human staggered forward, placing his scarred hand against the surface of the sphere. Light belongs to everyone, he whispered. And the forge awoke. The forge shuddered as the human's hand pressed against its surface. For an instant, nothing happened. The great sphere remained dark, its wounded shell lifeless. My chest tightened with despair. Had we come all this way only to fail? Then, faintly, a pulse. A ripple of light spread from beneath his palm, crawling across the sphere like veins awakening. The chamber trembled, dust falling in streams from the towering machines around us. The human sagged against the sphere, his breath ragged. Come on, he whispered, voice breaking. You're not done. None of us is done. The sphere answered. A glow burst forth, bright and golden, filling the chamber. It surged into the towers, racing through conduits, igniting runes that had slept for centuries. The hum of colossal engines rumbled through the forge, deep and resonant, like the heartbeat of a newborn star. I shielded my eyes as light cascaded outward, spilling through cracks and vents, rushing into the galaxy beyond. The darkness recoiled, shadows shrieking as the first true radiance in an age pushed them back. The forge was alive. And yet, the human was falling. I caught him as he slumped to the ground, his weight heavy against me. Blood stained my hands where I held him, his breath shallow, his face pale. No, I whispered fiercely. Stay with me. You did it. You lit the stars again. You can't leave now. His eyes fluttered open, and he smiled faintly. Not me, he rasped. Us. You carried me this far. You believed. Tears blurred my vision. Because you made me. He coughed, a weak laugh escaping his lips. Good. Then maybe you'll carry it further. His gaze shifted toward the sphere, now blazing like a small sun. Light needs keepers. Someone to remind the universe not to give up. I shook my head violently. I can't do this without you. Yes, you can, he whispered. His hand found mine, gripping weakly. That's the whole point. The chamber filled with brilliance as the forge's power surged outward, cascading across the stars. I saw visions in that light, worlds rekindled, suns reignited, survivors lifting their eyes as dawn returned to their skies. Life was returning. Because of him. Rest, I begged through my tears. Rest now. You've earned it. His grip tightened once, then loosened. His eyes closed. The human was gone. For a long time, I knelt there, holding him, the light of the forge burning around us. The silence pressed heavily, not with despair now, but with grief and awe. I had watched him fight, bleed, and endure. I had seen him defy the void with nothing but will. And in the end, he had given everything so that others might live. No prophecy. No chosen one. Just a man who refused to stop. I rose slowly, laying him gently against the base of the sphere. My chest ached, but in that ache burned something more than sorrow. A fire. He had passed it to me, as surely as the forge had passed its light to the stars. When I stepped from the chamber, the galaxy was changing. Beacons of light flared across the horizon, suns reigniting, worlds stirring. Survivors emerged from their hiding places, their faces lifted in wonder at the dawn they thought would never return. And when they looked up, they saw the forge burning bright once more. They saw hope. But I saw him. I will always see him. The human who carried fire into the dark. The one who showed me that light does not belong to gods or myths. It belongs to those who refuse to surrender. And as long as I breathe, I will keep it burning. Because the universe turned dark. And a human brought the light. Time has passed since the forge awoke. I cannot measure it the way I once did. Days and nights blur together beneath the glow of rekindled suns. Yet I know this, the galaxy is breathing again. I have seen it with my own eyes. Worlds once frozen are thawing. Cities that were tombs now pulse with life. Children who knew only darkness now laugh beneath skies painted with fire. Ships move between stars once more, their hulls gleaming as if reborn. The forge lit them. But the human lit me. I travel now, carrying his story. Not as a priest, not as a warrior, but as a witness. Every world I reach, I tell them, you are alive because of him. Because when the universe turned dark, he brought the light. And they listen. They whisper his name, sometimes wrong, sometimes forgotten in translation, but the meaning remains. To them, he is a legend, a figure larger than life. But to me, he was simply human. I remember his laughter in the ruins, the way it startled me because it was so rare, so alive. I remember his stubborn frown when I doubted, the way he would grit his teeth and push forward anyway. I remember the warmth of his hand on mine, steadying me when shadows tried to pull me down. And I remember the way he bled, quietly, without complaint, as if pain were nothing more than a price he had always expected to pay. He never claimed greatness. He never asked for it. He only walked forward, step by step, into the dark. And in doing so, he showed me what greatness truly is. Sometimes, survivors ask me, what was he like? Was he a warrior? A leader? A chosen one? And I tell them no. He was none of those things. He was just a man. Just human. But perhaps that is the most extraordinary thing of all. For when the machines of old slumbered, when the empires of the galaxy surrendered, when even the stars themselves went dark, it was not power or prophecy that saved us. It was one person, ordinary and flawed, who refused to bow. That is what humanity is. Not perfect, not eternal, but unyielding. And now, wherever I go, I see that unyielding spark catching in others. The children I once left in the ruins now lead their people, teaching survival, teaching resilience. Broken colonies begin to rise again, their banners painted not with crests of power, but with symbols of hope. Some even wear the sun pendant I carry, forged anew by hands that never knew its origin. The human would have smiled at that. At night, when I rest beneath strange skies, I speak to him. I tell him of the worlds he saved, the lives reborn because of his sacrifice. I tell him how his fire spreads, how his story carries beyond anything he could have dreamed. And though he does not answer, I still feel him. Not in voice, but in the light itself. Every dawn is his. Every rekindled star is a monument to him. I am no longer afraid of the dark. Because I know, even when it comes again, and it will, there will always be another human. Another spark. Another light. That is the legacy he left me. The legacy he left us all. And so, I keep walking. Step by step, world by world, carrying his story, carrying his fire. For the universe turned dark. And a human brought the light.